Welcome, dear listener, to a journey across the vast, rolling steppes of Central Asia, where the wind whispers tales of an empire that rose with astonishing speed and left an indelible mark on the course of human history. Tonight, we embark on an exploration of the Mongol Empire, a name that conjures images of horseback warriors, formidable conquests, and an influence that stretched from the shores of the Pacific to the heart of Europe. As the day's concerns begin to fade, allow your mind to drift back in time to the 12th and 13th centuries, a period when the world was about to be reshaped by a people accustomed to hardship, resilience, and an unwavering spirit. Our story begins not with grand cities or ancient monuments, but with the boundless grasslands, the steppes of Mongolia. This was a harsh environment, demanding a nomadic lifestyle. The people who inhabited these lands, various tribes of Mongols, Tatars, Karygids, and Naimans, were primarily pastoralists, herding sheep, goats, and most importantly, horses. Their lives were intimately connected to their animals and the seasonal movements for pasture. They lived in portable felt dwellings known as yurts or gurs, perfectly suited for their transient existence. This seemingly simple way of life, however, fostered incredible self-sufficiency, horsemanship, and martial prowess, skills that would prove foundational to their future dominion. Life on the steppe was often characterized by internecine strife. Tribes frequently raided each other for livestock, resources, and captives. Alliances were fluid, and betrayals were common. It was a world of shifting loyalties and constant vigilance, where survival depended on one's strength, cunning, and the ability to adapt. These constant struggles, while brutal, inadvertently forged a warrior culture unparalleled in its effectiveness. Every man, and often every woman, was capable of riding and fighting, skilled with the composite bow, and adept at enduring long journeys and harsh conditions. Into this world, around the year 1162, a boy named Temujin was born. His birthplace was likely near the Onan River, a vital waterway in the historical heartland of the Mongols. His father, Yesuge, was a respected chieftain of the Borjigin clan, a subgroup of the Mongol tribe. The early years of Temujin's life were fraught with peril. When he was just 9 years old, his father was poisoned by a rival Tatar tribe, leaving Temujin, his mother Hoelun, and his siblings vulnerable. According to historical accounts, his father's former allies abandoned the family, casting them into extreme poverty and hardship. They survived by hunting, fishing, and gathering wild plants, a stark departure from the life of a chieftain's family. This period of adversity profoundly shaped Temujin. He experienced betrayal, hunger, and the constant threat from rival clans. Legend tells of him even killing his half-brother Bekter in a dispute over food, demonstrating a ruthless pragmatism that would later define his leadership. He was captured by the Taijiyuts, a rival clan, and held captive with a wooden collar around his neck, a humiliating experience for a chieftain's son. Yet, he managed to escape, an early testament to his resourcefulness and determination. These formative experiences, the abandonment, the struggle for survival, the betrayals, and the escape, instilled in him a deep understanding of loyalty, discipline, and the necessity of forging strong, unbreakable bonds among his followers. He learned to trust only those who had proven their fealty in the crucible of shared adversity. As Temujin matured, he began the arduous task of gathering followers. His reputation as a survivor and a natural leader grew. He formed crucial early alliances, most notably with Jamuka, a blood brother from his youth, and Togrul, the powerful leader of the Karyid tribe, who had been an ally of his father. These alliances, though sometimes turbulent, provided him with the initial strength he needed to confront his enemies. His ability to attract and retain followers stemmed from several key qualities: his strategic brilliance, his personal charisma, his unwavering resolve, and perhaps most importantly, his promise of meritocracy. Unlike the traditional tribal system, where loyalty was often based on kinship, Temujin began to reward individuals based on their skill and loyalty, rather than their birth. This was a revolutionary concept in the tribal world, offering opportunities to talented commoners and dispossessed nobles alike. He slowly but surely began to overcome the various rival tribes. The Taijiyuts, who had once enslaved him, were decisively defeated. The Tatars, who had poisoned his father, faced his wrath. Temujin was methodical in his approach, learning from each conflict, adapting his tactics, and building an increasingly formidable force. He emphasized discipline and unity, contrasting sharply with the often disorganized and feuding nature of the other tribal confederations. His victories were not merely about conquest, they were about integrating the defeated into his growing army, offering them a choice between allegiance and annihilation. Those who joined him were treated with respect and given a place within his rapidly expanding structure. The culmination of this long process of unification occurred in 1206. After years of campaigning, countless skirmishes, and strategic alliances, Temujin had finally brought all the disparate Mongol and Turkic tribes of the steppe under his singular authority. This was an unprecedented achievement, as no one had ever managed to unite these fiercely independent peoples into a single political entity before. At a grand assembly, a Kurultai, held on the banks of the Onon River, Temujin was formally proclaimed Genghis Khan, a title that roughly translates to universal ruler or oceanic ruler. This moment marked the birth of the Mongol Empire, no longer just a collection of nomadic tribes, but a unified, powerful force poised to sweep across the known world. The name Genghis Khan would soon echo in fear and awe across continents. His leadership transformed the very nature of steppe warfare and governance. He established a written script for the Mongol language, codified a legal system known as the Yasa, and organized his military into a highly disciplined and efficient machine. Every warrior knew his place, every command was followed without question, and loyalty to the Khan was paramount. This internal cohesion, combined with their unmatched cavalry skills and innovative siege warfare, would soon be unleashed upon a world largely unprepared for such a formidable challenge. As we gently drift into the next phase of our narrative, we will explore how this newly forged empire, under the visionary leadership of Genghis Khan, began its astonishing expansion, forever altering the geopolitical landscape of Eurasia. As the gentle whispers of the steppe wind carry us forward, we now arrive at a pivotal moment in history: the unification of the Mongol tribes and the initial, breathtaking wave of conquests that followed. Having been proclaimed Genghis Khan in 1206, Temujin was no longer merely a tribal chieftain. He was the leader of a burgeoning empire, ready to cast its shadow far beyond the confines of the Mongolian grasslands. This transformation from disparate, often warring, clans into a unified military force was the bedrock upon which the vast Mongol Empire would be built. Genghis Khan's genius lay not only in his military prowess, but also in his extraordinary organizational skills. He understood that to maintain unity among diverse peoples and to project power effectively, a new system was required. The traditional tribal structures, with their shifting loyalties, were replaced by a highly disciplined decimal system for military organization. The army was divided into units of 10, 100, 1,000, and 10,000, known as Araft, Zun, Mayangan, and Tumen, respectively. Loyalty was no longer primarily to one's clan, but directly to the Khan. Officers were appointed based on merit and proven loyalty, not hereditary status, a radical concept for the time. This meritocracy fostered fierce devotion and ensured that the most capable individuals rose through the ranks. Discipline was paramount. Orders from the Khan were absolute. Desertion or cowardice in battle was punishable by death for the entire unit. This draconian yet effective measure instilled a remarkable sense of cohesion and mutual reliance among the soldiers. Training was constant, focusing on horsemanship, archery, and tactical maneuvers. The Mongol cavalry was legendary, each warrior typically having several horses, allowing for swift changes and sustained rapid movement over vast distances. Their composite bows were incredibly powerful, capable of piercing armor, and their skill in shooting from horseback, even at a full gallop, was unparalleled. With his unified forces, Genghis Khan turned his attention outward. His first major campaign was against the Tanguts, who had established the Western Xia dynasty in northwest China. The Tanguts had refused to submit to Mongol authority and were strategically important as they controlled parts of the Silk Road. The campaigns against Western Xia, beginning in 1209, were challenging. The Mongols, accustomed to open steppe warfare, had to learn the intricacies of siege warfare to overcome fortified cities. They quickly adapted, employing engineers, diverting rivers, and using siege engines, often incorporating captured peoples and their skills into their army. The Tanguts eventually submitted, becoming vassals of the Mongol Empire. Next, Genghis Khan set his sights on the Jurchen Jin dynasty in northern China. The Jin dynasty was a formidable power, controlling vast territories, rich cities, and a large, if somewhat unwieldy, army. The Mongols launched their invasion in 1211. This campaign was on a scale far grander than anything they had attempted before. The initial battles saw the Mongols utilize their superior cavalry and psychological warfare, creating panic among the less mobile Jin forces. They bypassed heavily fortified cities at first, raiding the countryside, destroying crops, and disrupting supply lines, effectively weakening the Jin's resolve. The capture of Zhongdu, modern-day Beijing, the Jin capital, in 1215 was a significant milestone. It demonstrated the Mongols' increasing proficiency in siege warfare and their determination. While the city initially resisted fiercely, it eventually fell, plundered, and largely destroyed. This victory sent shockwaves across Asia, signaling that a new, terrifyingly effective power had emerged from the steppe. The Jin dynasty, though severely crippled, managed to cling to power in the south for several more decades, but their dominance was broken. As the Mongols consolidated their gains in northern China, an incident in the west would draw Genghis Khan's attention to an even grander theater. This was the encounter with the Khwarezmian Empire. The Khwarezmian Empire was a vast and wealthy Persianate Muslim empire that stretched across Central Asia, including parts of modern-day Iran, Afghanistan, and Uzbekistan. In 1218, Genghis Khan dispatched a trade caravan and envoys to the Khwarezmian city of Otrar, seeking peaceful commercial relations. However, the governor of Otrar, Inalchuk, accused the merchants of being spies and executed them, confiscating their goods. Subsequent Mongol envoys sent to demand reparations were also executed by Sultan Muhammad II of Khwarezm. This act of grave disrespect and blatant aggression infuriated Genghis Khan. He viewed the execution of his envoys as an unforgivable insult, an affront that demanded total retribution. What followed was one of the most devastating campaigns in human history. In 1219, Genghis Khan personally led a massive Mongol army, estimated to be between 100,000 and 200,000 warriors, across the Tian Shan Mountains into Transoxiana, the heartland of the Khwarezmian Empire. The Khwarezmian forces were numerically superior, but they were spread out, their commanders often feuding, and their tactics conventional. Sultan Muhammad II made the fatal error of dispersing his army to defend numerous cities rather than concentrating them for a decisive field battle. The Mongols, utilizing their characteristic speed, deception, and overwhelming force, systematically besieged and destroyed the major Khwarezmian cities. Bukhara, Samarkand, and Urgench fell one after another, often after fierce resistance. The destruction was immense. Populations were massacred, cities razed, and irrigation systems, vital for agriculture in the region, were deliberately destroyed. The scale of the violence was designed to terrorize, to ensure no future resistance, and to avenge the insult to the Khan. Sultan Muhammad II fled westward, eventually dying on an island in the Caspian Sea, his empire in ruins. His son, Jalal ad-Din, continued to resist valiantly for several years, but he too was ultimately defeated and forced to flee into India. This campaign not only demonstrated the Mongols' military superiority, but also their unyielding determination to punish defiance. The destruction of the Khwarezmian Empire opened up the western routes for further Mongol expansion, setting the stage for their eventual incursions into Russia and Eastern Europe. The sheer speed and devastating efficiency of these early conquests left surrounding powers in a state of shock and fear, quickly solidifying the Mongol reputation as an unstoppable force. As we conclude this chapter, reflecting on the whirlwind of unification and the initial, awe-inspiring conquests, we can appreciate the foundation laid by Genghis Khan. From a scattered collection of steppe tribes, he forged an empire that, in just a few decades, had become the largest contiguous land empire the world had ever seen. The methods were often brutal, yet the strategic vision was undeniable. With the Khwarezmian Empire utterly crushed, the path was clear for the Mongol armies to explore and conquer new lands to the west, bringing them into direct contact with the civilizations of Eastern Europe. Allow these images of vast steppes, thundering hooves, and the resolute spirit of a burgeoning empire to gently accompany your thoughts as we prepare to drift into the next phase of our historical journey. As our historical journey continues, we now turn our gaze westward, following the relentless expansion of the Mongol Empire beyond Central Asia and into the heart of Eastern Europe. With the utter devastation of the Khwarezmian Empire, the Mongols had effectively cleared a path, and their scouts and advance parties began to probe the lands to the west. This period, particularly from the 1220s onwards, saw the Mongol war machine come face to face with the fragmented states of Kievan Rus and the burgeoning kingdoms of Eastern Europe, leaving a profound and lasting impact. The initial incursions into Europe were led by Jebe and Subutai, two of Genghis Khan's most brilliant and daring generals. After pursuing Sultan Jalal ad-Din across Persia and into India, they turned north, sweeping through the Caucasus Mountains. In 1223, they encountered a combined force of Rus's principalities and Kumen, or Kipchak, warriors at the Battle of the Khalkha River. The Rus's princes, often at odds with each other, failed to coordinate effectively against the disciplined Mongol forces. Subutai and Jebi employed their characteristics of feigned retreats, encirclement, and overwhelming archery volleys. The battle was a crushing defeat for the Russes and their allies, signaling the Mongols' formidable military capabilities to a new set of opponents. Although the Mongols withdrew after this victory, it served as a chilling precursor of what was to come. Upon the death of Genghis Khan in 1227, the vast empire was divided among his sons and grandsons, forming the foundations of the future khanates. The westernmost territories, including what would become the Golden Horde, were earmarked for Jochi, Genghis's eldest son, and later his descendants, particularly Batu Khan, Jochi's son. It was under Batu Khan that the major invasion of Europe would commence. In the late 1230s, a new, massive Mongol invasion force, led by Batu Khan and the veteran general Subutai, began to consolidate their grip on the Eurasian steppe, subjugating the various nomadic tribes, including the Kumans, who fled westward into Hungary, seeking refuge. This westward movement brought the Mongols directly to the borders of the fragmented Rus lands. The Rus principalities, successors to the once mighty Kievan Rus, were disunited and ill-prepared for the onslaught. They were a collection of independent and often rivalrous states, such as the Principality of Ryazan, Vladimir Suzdal, and Novgorod. Each principality had its own prince, and interprincely feuds often took precedence over common defense. This disunity proved to be their undoing. The Mongol invasion of Russes began in earnest in 1237. The winter months, traditionally a time for armies to halt campaigns, were precisely when the Mongols struck. The frozen rivers provided natural highways for their cavalry, allowing for unprecedented speed and maneuverability. Ryazan was the first major city to fall after a brutal siege. Its destruction was total, setting a terrifying precedent. City after city followed. Kolomna, Moscow, Vladimir, and Suzdal were all sacked and burned in quick succession. The Mongols employed sophisticated siege engines, often brought from China or built on site by engineers from conquered lands. In 1240, the grand city of Kiev, the spiritual and cultural heart of Rus, faced the Mongol wrath. Despite its formidable walls, Kiev fell after a prolonged siege, its churches and monasteries plundered, and its population decimated. The destruction was so profound that travelers later described the city as little more than a pile of ruins. While some northern cities like Novgorod and Haskov were spared direct destruction by paying tribute, most of the major Rus' cities experienced immense devastation. The impact on Rus was catastrophic. The country was largely depopulated, its economic and cultural development severely set back. The Mongols established the Golden Horde, a powerful khanate centered on the lower Volga River, which would rule over the Rus' lands for over 2 centuries. The Rus' princes were forced to acknowledge the supremacy of the Khan of the Golden Horde, paying heavy annual tributes, the yoke of the Tatars, and requiring an investiture from the Khan to rule their own principalities. This period of Mongol domination, often referred to as the Tatar yoke, profoundly shaped Russian history, fostering a more autocratic style of rule and isolating Rus from the burgeoning Renaissance in Western Europe. After their devastating campaigns in Russes, the Mongol armies, still under the command of Batu Khan and Subutai, pushed further west into Central Europe. Their next targets were Poland and Hungary. These campaigns were not merely punitive raids, they were part of a larger strategic plan to extend Mongol influence and control over the vast Eurasian landmass. In 1241, the Mongol forces split. One wing, led by Kaidu and Baida, invaded Poland. They defeated Polish and Teutonic Knight forces at the Battle of Legnica on April 9, 1241. The Christian forces, led by Duke Henry II the Pious of Silesia, were overwhelmed by the superior Mongol tactics, particularly their feigned retreats and archer volleys. Meanwhile, the main Mongol army under Batu Khan and Subutai launched a massive invasion of Hungary. Hungary was then ruled by King Bela IV, who had granted asylum to the fleeing Cuman refugees. This was seen as a direct challenge by the Mongols. On April 11, 1241, just 2 days after Legnica, the Mongols achieved their most decisive victory in Europe at the Battle of Mohi, also known as the Battle of the Sajo River. King Bela's army was utterly routed, demonstrating the Mongols' tactical brilliance in a pitched battle against a large European army. Hungary was subsequently devastated, with large areas laid waste and its population subjected to brutal massacres. The path to Western Europe seemed open. The Mongol armies were poised to advance further into Austria and beyond. However, a pivotal event occurred in December 1241, the death of Ögedei Khan, Genghis Khan's successor and the great Khan of the entire Mongol Empire, back in Mongolia. This event triggered the requirement for all senior Mongol princes, including Batu Khan, to return to the Mongol heartland for the Kurultai, Great Assembly, to elect a new great Khan. This sudden withdrawal, rather than any decisive military defeat, spared Western Europe from a full-scale Mongol invasion. The Mongol advance, having reached the Adriatic Sea, abruptly halted, and they eventually withdrew eastward, though the Golden Horde would remain a dominant power in Eastern Europe for centuries. The Mongol invasion of Europe, though relatively brief in its direct presence, left an indelible mark. It highlighted the vulnerability of fragmented European states to a unified, disciplined, and technologically advanced military force. It spurred improvements in European fortifications and military organization as they sought to understand and counter the Mongol threat. Most importantly, it isolated Russes from the intellectual and cultural developments of Western Europe, shaping a distinct historical trajectory for Russia. As we gently transition to the next chapter, allow the echoes of thundering hooves and the vastness of the Eurasian plains to resonate in your mind. We move from the direct, devastating impact of Mongol conquest to the intriguing story of how they consolidated their vast territories, established new dynasties, and fostered an era of unprecedented interconnectedness across the globe. Having witnessed the astonishing sweep of Mongol conquests across the steppes and into Europe, we now drift eastward again to a chapter of the Mongol Empire's story that is perhaps one of its most fascinating and culturally rich: the establishment of the Yuan dynasty in China and the reign of Kublai Khan. This period marks a significant shift from raw conquest to organized governance and a remarkable, if sometimes contentious, cultural synthesis. After the death of Ögedei Khan in 1241 and the subsequent regencies and brief reigns of his successors, the Mongol Empire experienced a period of internal struggle and fragmentation, particularly regarding who would hold the title of Great Khan, Kagan. This internal politicking temporarily diverted attention from further large-scale foreign conquests. However, the foundational structures of Mongol rule remained in place across the vast territories. The focus eventually shifted to Möngke Khan, Ögedei's nephew, who became Great Khan in 1251. Möngke was a capable ruler who sought to restore stability and continue the expansionist policies. He entrusted his younger brother, Kublai, with the task of conquering the wealthy and culturally sophisticated Southern Song dynasty in China. The Southern Song, controlling the richest agricultural lands and most developed urban centers in China, had resisted Mongol incursions for decades, thanks to strong defensive lines and advanced naval technology. The conquest of the Southern Song was a monumental undertaking, far more complex than the rapid cavalry campaigns of Genghis Khan. It required prolonged sieges, naval warfare, and the mastery of diverse terrain. Kublai Khan, who had a genuine fascination with Chinese culture and governance, meticulously prepared for this campaign, often incorporating Chinese advisors and engineers into his service. He recognized that simply destroying cities, as had been done in Central Asia, was counterproductive in China. The goal was to absorb, not annihilate, its immense wealth and administrative capacity. The final phase of the conquest began in earnest after Möngke Khan's death in 1259 during a campaign against the Song. This death triggered another succession crisis. Kublai quickly returned to his base in Shangdu, Xanadu, and, despite a challenge from his younger brother Arik Bok, managed to secure his claim to the throne, being proclaimed Great Khan in 1260. This proclamation solidified his position as the de facto ruler of the Mongol territories in East Asia, though his claim as universal Great Khan was not universally accepted by all branches of the Mongol Empire. With his position solidified, Kublai focused on the southern Song. The war was long and arduous, lasting until 1279. Key to his success was the capture of Xiangyang in 1273, a heavily fortified city that had resisted for years. The Mongols, with the aid of captured Chinese and Persian engineers, employed advanced siege weaponry, including formidable trebuchets, some capable of launching stones weighing over 200 pounds, to finally breach its defenses. The final blow came at the Battle of Yamen in 1279, a decisive naval engagement where the Song fleet was destroyed, and the last Song emperor, a young boy, perished. With the conquest of the southern Song, Kublai Khan became the undisputed ruler of all of China. In 1271, even before the final defeat of the Song, Kublai formally established the Yuan dynasty, adopting a Chinese dynastic name. This act was highly significant. It signaled his intention not merely to rule China as a conqueror, but to integrate himself and his Mongol elite into the established framework of Chinese imperial rule. He moved the capital from Karakorum in Mongolia to Dadu, modern-day Beijing, a grand city built on a vast symmetrical plan, reflecting both Mongol ambition and Chinese urban traditions. Kublai Khan's reign, 1260 to 1294, was a period of immense transformation for China. He sought to create a stable and prosperous empire, blending Mongol and Chinese administrative practices. While he maintained a clear distinction between Mongols and Chinese in terms of social hierarchy and legal status, he also recognized the necessity of utilizing Chinese bureaucratic expertise. He patronized arts and sciences, encouraged trade, and undertook ambitious public works projects, including extending the Grand Canal to supply Dadu with grain from the south. Under the Yuan dynasty, China experienced an unprecedented level of interaction with the outside world. The security provided by the vast Mongol Empire facilitated the Pax Mongolica, a period of relative peace and stability across Eurasia that greatly enhanced trade along the Silk Road. Merchants, diplomats, and travelers like the famous Venetian Marco Polo journeyed freely across the continent, exchanging goods, ideas, and technologies. Marco Polo's accounts, though debated by some historians, provide invaluable insights into the splendor of Kublai Khan's court and the prosperity of Yuan China. He describes Dadu as a magnificent city, bustling with commerce and adorned with opulent palaces. Kublai Khan's attempts to expand his empire further met with mixed success. His invasions of Japan in 1274 and 1281, though massive undertakings involving large fleets and armies, were ultimately thwarted by fierce Japanese resistance and, crucially, by devastating typhoons, which the Japanese famously called divine winds or kamikaze. These failures marked the limits of Mongol expansion eastward by sea. He also launched campaigns into Southeast Asia, including Vietnam and Java, with similarly limited success, facing formidable jungle terrain and effective local resistance. Despite these setbacks, the Yuan dynasty under Kublai Khan presided over a period of economic growth and cultural exchange. New crops and technologies were introduced to China from the West, while Chinese innovations, such as printing and gunpowder, continued to spread westward. Foreigners, including Muslims, Tibetans, and even some Europeans, found opportunities at the Yuan court and in commerce. However, the Yuan dynasty also faced significant challenges. The ethnic and social distinctions imposed by the Mongols bred resentment among the Han Chinese population. Kublai's ambitious projects and military campaigns were expensive, leading to heavy taxation and inflation. Later Yuan emperors, less capable than Kublai, struggled with corruption, natural disasters, and internal rebellions. This ultimately led to the decline of the dynasty. As we bring this chapter to a close, we reflect on the fascinating legacy of Kublai Khan and the Yuan dynasty. It represents a unique moment in history where a nomadic conquering power sought to govern a highly sophisticated sedentary civilization, creating a hybrid culture and fostering an unprecedented era of global interconnectedness. The grandeur of Dadu, the tales of Marco Polo, and the vast network of trade routes all speak to the enduring impact of this period. As we gently transition into the next segment of our narrative, we will turn our attention to the other major khanates that emerged from the fragmentation of the Mongol Empire, exploring their distinct paths and influences in the west and north. Our journey through the vast expanse of the Mongol Empire now takes us away from the splores of the Yuan dynasty in the east and towards the western and northern reaches of this colossal dominion. Here, two powerful successor states, the Ilkhanate in Persia and the Golden Horde in Eastern Europe and Russia, emerged from the fragmentation of the unified empire, each forging its own distinct path and leaving a unique legacy. These khanates illustrate the diverse ways in which Mongol rule adapted to local cultures and political landscapes. Let us first turn our attention to the Ilkhanate, which was established primarily in Persia and parts of the Middle East. The origins of the Ilkhanate lie with Hulagu Khan, another grandson of Genghis Khan and brother of Kublai Khan. In the 1250s, Mongol Khan, the then Great Khan, dispatched Hulagu on a massive campaign to conquer the remaining Muslim states in the Middle East, particularly the Abbasid Caliphate in Baghdad, and the Nizari Ismaili assassins' strongholds. Hulagu's campaign was as swift and devastating as earlier Mongol incursions. He first dismantled the formidable Ismaili strongholds in the Alborz Mountains, culminating in the capture of their fortress of Alamut in 1256. This was followed by the infamous siege of Baghdad in 1258. Baghdad, the ancient capital of the Abbasid Caliphate, was a center of Islamic learning and culture. Despite its rich heritage, the city's defenses were inadequate, and its caliph, al-Mustasim, proved indecisive. After a relatively short siege, the Mongols breached the walls, and Baghdad was subjected to a brutal sack. Libraries, mosques, and palaces were destroyed, and countless inhabitants were massacred. The last Abbasid caliph was executed, marking the end of a caliphate that had lasted for over 5 centuries and a profound psychological blow to the Islamic world. Following the fall of Baghdad, Hulagu continued his advance westward, conquering Syria. However, his progress was halted by the Mamluks of Egypt at the Battle of Ain Jalut in 1260. This battle, fought in present-day Israel, was a crucial turning point. The Mamluks, a powerful military caste composed largely of Turkic slave soldiers, inflicted a rare and decisive defeat on the Mongols, effectively preventing their further expansion into North Africa and the Levant. This defeat, combined with the news of Mongol Khan's death and the subsequent succession struggle involving Kublai and Arik Bök, led Hulagu to return to Persia to consolidate his holdings, establishing the Ilkhanate as a distinct entity. The Ilkhans, as the rulers of this new khanate were known, initially maintained the traditional Mongol intolerance for sedentary populations. However, over time, they gradually adopted Persian culture and, significantly, converted to Islam. This conversion, which became official under Ghazan Khan in 1295, marked a profound shift. It integrated the Mongol ruling elite into the predominant religion of their subjects and fostered a period of remarkable cultural flourishing. Despite the initial devastation, the Ilkhanate became a vibrant center for art, architecture, and science, often drawing on both Persian and Chinese influences due to their connection to the Great Khan in China. Astronomy, mathematics, and medicine saw significant advancements, and magnificent illustrated manuscripts and architectural wonders were created during this period. The Ilkhans also maintained close ties with the Yuan dynasty in China, facilitating intellectual and commercial exchange across their shared territories along the Silk Road. Simultaneously, in the vast plains of Eastern Europe and Russia, another powerful khanate, the Golden Horde, was solidifying its grip. As we discussed earlier, the Golden Horde's foundation lay with Batu Khan, who led the devastating Mongol invasions of Rus and Eastern Europe in the 1230s and 1240s. Its core territory was the steppes north of the Black Sea and the lower Volga River, with its capital eventually established at Sarai. The Golden Horde's relationship with its Rus subjects was different from the direct rule exercised in the Ilkhanate or Yuan China. Instead of direct occupation, the Golden Horde ruled the Rus principalities indirectly through a system of tribute and vassalage. Rus's princes were required to travel to Sarai, often a perilous journey, to receive their yarliks, patents of office, from the Khan, confirming their right to rule. This Tatar yoke, as it was known, lasted for over 200 years, from the mid-13th century to the late 15th century. During this period, the Rus principalities were largely left to manage their internal affairs, but they were subject to heavy taxation and periodic punitive raids if tribute was not paid or if rebellions arose. The Mongols also conducted censuses to ensure accurate tax collection and maintained a network of couriers for swift communication. The Golden Horde's presence stifled the political and economic development of Rus, diverting its wealth and isolating it from the burgeoning intellectual and cultural currents of Western Europe. However, it also inadvertently contributed to the rise of Moscow, which shrewdly exploited its relationship with the Golden Horde, often acting as tax collector for the Mongols and eventually accumulating enough power to challenge their authority. Like the Ilkhanate, the Golden Horde also underwent a process of cultural adaptation. While initially shamanist, the ruling elite gradually converted to Islam, particularly under Uzbeg Khan in the early 14th century. This conversion further cemented the Golden Horde's ties with the wider Islamic world, especially with the Mamluks of Egypt, with whom they formed an alliance against the Ilkhanate. This shift in religion also led to the construction of mosques and Islamic learning centers in their territories. The Golden Horde's vast nomadic lands served as crucial conduits for trade between East and West. The Pax Mongolica ensured the relative safety of the trade routes, and cities like Sarai became important commercial hubs, attracting merchants from across Eurasia. The cultural interactions were complex. While the Rus principalities largely preserved their Orthodox Christian identity, they absorbed some Mongol administrative practices and vocabulary. Both the Ilkhanate and the Golden Horde demonstrate the remarkable flexibility of Mongol rule. While maintaining core Mongol military and administrative principles, they adapted to the diverse cultures and religions of their subjects. The Ilkhanate, through its adoption of Persian culture and Islam, became a significant force in the Islamic world, contributing to its artistic and scientific heritage. The Golden Horde, through its long suzerainty over Rus, profoundly shaped the historical trajectory of Russia, influencing its political development and its eventual emergence as a powerful state. As we conclude this exploration of the Western Khanates, we recognize that while they were nominally part of the larger Mongol Empire, they increasingly developed their own distinct identities and interests. These internal divisions, combined with other factors, would eventually contribute to the fragmentation and decline of the once unified Mongol dominion, a topic we will delve into in our next chapter. Allow the images of these vast, culturally rich territories, shaped by Mongol might and then subtly transformed by local influences, to gently guide you towards a restful slumber. As we journey through the grand narrative of the Mongol Empire, we arrive now at a period of gradual transformation, examining the factors that contributed to its eventual decline and fragmentation. From a single, unified, and seemingly unstoppable force under Genghis Khan, the empire evolved into a collection of powerful but increasingly independent khanates. This process was not a sudden collapse, but rather a complex interplay of internal dynamics, external pressures, and the sheer challenge of governing such an immense and diverse territory. One of the primary factors contributing to the decline was the succession crisis that plagued the empire after the death of Genghis Khan. While Genghis had established a system of succession among his sons, the concept of a single, undisputed great Khan became increasingly contentious. The division of the empire into appanages, territories granted to various princely branches, meant that each branch developed its own interests and ambitions. The rivalry between Kublai Khan and his brother Arik Bokeh for the title of Great Khan in the 1260s was a significant turning point. Although Kublai emerged victorious, the conflict alienated many of the Western princes, particularly those of the Golden Horde and the Chagatai Khanate, who resented Kublai's increasing focus on China and his adoption of Chinese imperial practices. This effectively shattered the political unity of the Mongol Empire, transforming it from a centralized entity into a collection of loosely connected, often antagonistic, successor states. The vastness of the empire itself became a challenge. Governing such an immense territory, encompassing vastly different cultures, economies, and geographical conditions, proved incredibly difficult. The sheer distances made rapid communication and centralized control arduous. While the Mongol postal system, the yam, was remarkably efficient for its time, it could not entirely overcome the logistical hurdles of managing an empire that stretched from the Pacific to Eastern Europe. Local customs, laws, and administrative practices, particularly in the sophisticated civilizations of China and Persia, often clashed with traditional Mongol nomadic governance. Another crucial factor was the assimilation of the Mongol elite into the cultures of their subjects. In the Yuan dynasty, the Mongols adopted Chinese administrative methods and patronage of the arts, yet they remained distinct. In the Ilkhanate, the Mongol rulers converted to Islam and became patrons of Persian culture. In the Golden Horde, many also converted to Islam and integrated into the Turkic world of the steppes. While these adaptations allowed for more stable governance in their respective regions, they simultaneously weakened the shared Mongol identity and loyalty to a distant Great Khan. The distinct religious and cultural identities of the Khanates often led to internal conflicts and wars between them, such as the frequent clashes between the Ilkhanate and the Golden Horde, despite their shared ancestry. Economic pressures also played a significant role. The initial conquests brought immense wealth through plunder and tribute. However, maintaining the vast military and administrative apparatus of the empire, as well as undertaking ambitious public works projects, such as Kublai Khan's extension of the Grand Canal or his disastrous naval invasions of Japan, proved incredibly expensive. This often led to excessive taxation, inflation, and the issuance of paper money without sufficient backing, causing economic instability and widespread hardship for the conquered populations. For instance, in Yuan China, the over-reliance on paper currency and a series of natural disasters, including devastating floods along the Yellow River, further exacerbated economic distress and fueled peasant unrest. Rebellions by the subject populations became increasingly frequent and organized. The memory of the initial brutal conquests faded, and the burden of Mongol rule, combined with economic grievances and cultural clashes, spurred resistance. In China, the Red Turban Rebellion, fueled by resentment against Mongol rule and economic hardship, gained momentum in the mid-14th century, eventually leading to the overthrow of the Yuan dynasty. In Persia, the Ilkhanate fragmented into various smaller successor states after a succession of weak rulers and internal power struggles, eventually paving the way for new dynasties like the Timurids. In the Golden Horde, internal dynastic disputes, rivalries among the Khans, and the growing strength of the Muscovite Russes principalities gradually eroded its power. The Russes' princely states, having learned from their earlier defeats and exploiting Mongol internal weaknesses, began to assert their independence, culminating in events like the Battle of Kulikovo in 1380, though full liberation from the Tatar yoke would take another century. The plague, specifically the Black Death, which swept across Eurasia in the mid-14th century, also dealt a devastating blow. While not exclusively a Mongol phenomenon, the vast trade networks facilitated by the Pax Mongolica inadvertently helped spread the plague rapidly from east to west. It decimated populations, disrupted trade, and further destabilized political structures across all the Khanates, weakening their ability to maintain control and defend against external or internal challenges. By the end of the 14th century, the once mighty Mongol Empire, as a unified political entity, had largely ceased to exist. The Yuan dynasty in China was overthrown by the Ming dynasty in 1368. The Ilkhanate had fragmented into several smaller, short-lived states. The Chagatai Khanate in Central Asia was also in decline, though it would see a resurgence under figures like Timur, Tamerlane. only the Golden Horde in Eastern Europe continued to exert significant power, but even it eventually fractured into smaller khanates like the Crimean Khanate, Kazan Khanate, and Astrakhan Khanate, eventually succumbing to the rising power of Muscovy in the late 15th and early 16th centuries. The decline of the Mongol Empire was thus a multifaceted process. Inherent challenges of succession and governance over a vast territory, the assimilation of the Mongol ruling class, economic strains, and the resurgence of conquered populations. What remained were not unified empires, but successor states, each with its own trajectory, profoundly shaped by the legacy of Mongol rule, yet distinct in their character and destiny.